A scroll fragment smaller than a postcard sits in Vault 12, A at the Bodleian Library in Oxford, part of the collection James Bruce brought from Ethiopia in 1773. The Book of Enoch was removed from the Bible by the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE. For 17 centuries, banned, hidden, called dangerous by church authorities. When archaeologists discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947 at Qumran, 11 separate copies of Enoch surfaced, more than most books that made it into the Old Testament. Scholars who translated the oldest fragments found something Genesis never mentions. Before humans, God created another species. Intelligent, powerful, given authority over creation. Enoch describes what they were supposed to do, why they failed, and what God did when he realized the first creation could not be trusted with the assignment. The text names them. It describes their abilities. It records the moment God decided they had to be replaced. In the next several minutes, you'll see what Enoch wrote about the beings that came before us and why the church erased them from every Bible except one. If forbidden biblical history fascinates you, hit subscribe. Every week we uncover what was removed from Scripture. But here's what makes this stranger. The passage appears across multiple sections of Enoch, chapters 6 through 15 in the Book of the Watchers, chapters 69 and 86 in the Dream Visions, and scattered references in the Astronomical Book. Fragment 4Q201, stored at the Israel Museum's Shrine of the Book, contains portions of chapter 6 in Aramaic. Carbon dating places it at 200 BCE, making it contemporary with the editing of Genesis. The complete text exists in Ge'ez manuscripts preserved by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church at Aksum. Dr. George Nicholsberg, who published the definitive commentary on 1 Enoch through Fortress Press in 2001, identified the Watcher's narrative as the theological foundation for understanding why humanity exists, as a second creation rather than the original plan. Not humans first. Something else first. The beings Enoch calls Watchers were created before Adam, given dominion over the earth, assigned to observe and guide creation, and then violated every instruction they were given. And this is where it gets disturbing. The text doesn't present this as metaphor or allegory. Enoch writes an historical narrative using the same matter-of-fact tone you'd use describing a failed business venture. Chapter 6, verse 2 states plainly, "The angels, the children of heaven, saw the daughters of men and desired them." Not symbolic language, direct observation leading to direct action. These were not fallen angels in the sense of demons cast out for rebellion. They were the original workforce, God's first attempt at creating beings capable of managing the earth. Chapter 15, verse 7 has God himself explaining what the Watchers were supposed to be. "You were spiritual beings living forever, not meant to take wives or produce children. That is why I made you different from humans." They were created immortal, non-reproductive, assigned to watch over creation without interfering. They failed the assignment. What we're looking at is a 3-part sequence explaining why humans exist. The text begins with the original creation. Chapter 15, verse 3 describes God addressing the Watchers after their rebellion. "You were in heaven, you were holy and eternal, but you have defiled yourselves with women." The implication is clear. Before the Watchers fell, they were the primary intelligent species on Earth. Not humans, the Watchers. Chapter 69, verse 1 calls them the children of heaven, and specifies they numbered in the thousands, organized in ranks, assigned to different regions and functions. Enoch names the ranks: archangels, angels, watchers, holy ones. The Watchers were middle management, immortal, powerful, tasked with observation and maintenance of natural systems. Genesis 1:26 says God created humans in our image, plural. Enoch explains who the "our" refers to: the Watchers. Humans were modeled after the beings who came before. But the text doesn't stop there. What follows in chapter 6 is the corruption. 200 Watchers led by Shemiyaza descend to Mount Hermon and make a pact. Verse 3 records the oath they swore to each other. Let us all swear an oath and bind ourselves with mutual curses not to abandon this plan, but to carry it through. They knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew it violated their purpose. They swore the oath anyway, because they wanted what humans had: physical form, reproduction, legacy. Chapter 7, verse 1 describes the result. And they took wives for themselves, and everyone chose one for himself. And they began to go into them and to defile themselves with them, and to teach them sorcery and enchantments and the cutting of roots. The Watchers didn't just reproduce, they taught forbidden knowledge. Azazel taught weapon making and metallurgy. Barakel taught astrology. Kokabeel taught the constellations. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun. Each one passed along technical knowledge humanity was not supposed to have. The text provides the complete curriculum of forbidden knowledge in chapter 8. Each Watcher had a specialty. Each specialty served a different domain. Azazel taught the making of swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, the technology of warfare. He taught the extraction and working of metals from the ground. He taught women cosmetics and the art of beautifying the eyes and the use of precious stones. Shemiaza taught enchantments and the cutting of roots, plant medicine, and spells. Armaros taught the resolving of enchantments, counterspells, and protective magic. Barakel taught the observers of the stars, astrology as a predictive science. Kokabeel taught the signs and omens, divination through celestial observation. Ezekiel taught the knowledge of clouds, weather prediction, and atmospheric science. Arakiel taught the signs of the earth, geology, mineralogy, resource location. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun, solar cycles, agriculture timing, calendrical systems. Sariel taught the course of the moon, lunar phases, tidal patterns, menstrual cycles. The Watchers didn't give humanity one forbidden technology. They gave humanity civilization itself. Metallurgy, agriculture, medicine, astronomy, writing. Every foundational technology, according to Enoch, was taught by beings who were not supposed to teach it. Humans were meant to develop these skills slowly, naturally, under observation. The Watchers bypassed the timeline. What the list reveals is intentionality. These were not random lessons. Each Watcher taught the domain they had been assigned to oversee. Barakel watched the stars, so he taught star reading. Arakiel monitored geological processes, so he taught mineral extraction. The Watchers were converting their surveillance assignments into instruction manuals. They were sharing operational knowledge they had gained from managing creation. Chapter 9, verse 8 records the complaint brought before God. You have made known to them all the secrets, and they have learned all the mysteries which the angels did not reveal. The Watchers broke operational security. They leaked the manual. What follows in chapter 7, verse 2 is the consequence. The hybrid offspring, called Nephilim, grew to enormous size and consumed everything. Verse 4 says, they devoured all the hard-won produce of mankind until people could no longer sustain them, and the Nephilim turned against mankind to devour them. The first creation, the Watchers, corrupted the second creation, humans, and produced a third creation, the Nephilim, that nearly destroyed both. Chapter 10 records God's response. Verse 1 says, Then the Most High spoke and sent Uriel to the son of Lamech, saying, Go to Noah and tell him in my name, hide yourself. The flood was not punishment for human sin. It was the reset button after the first creation failed. God gave the Watchers one job: manage the earth without interference. They interfered. They corrupted. They had to be replaced. And then comes the part modern readers miss. Chapter 15, verse 8, contains God's explanation for why the Watchers' children, the Nephilim, had to be destroyed. Now the giants who were born from spirits and flesh will be called evil spirits on the earth, and on the earth will be their dwelling. Evil spirits came from their bodies because they were created from above. From the holy Watchers was their beginning and primary foundation. They will be evil spirits on earth and will be called evil spirits. The Nephilim died in the flood. Their spirits became demons. The text is saying demons are the disembodied spirits of the hybrid offspring produced when the first creation rebelled against God's design. Every demon, according to Enoch, is the ghost of a Nephilim. The spiritual warfare framework of Christianity is based on the biological failure of the pre-human creation. Here's what the translators left out. The Standard English edition of Enoch, based on RRH, Charles' 1906 translation, condenses chapter 15, verse 2, to read, "Why have you left the high and holy heaven?" But the Ge'ez manuscript at Aksum includes a phrase that Western editions omit. Dr. Ephraim Isaac, who translated the Ethiopian text for Oxford in 1983, confirmed the clause exists, but noted it was shortened in published versions because it implies temporal priority of angelic creation inconsistent with Augustinian theology. The full text, translated directly, reads, "Why have you left the high and holy heaven where you dwelt from the beginning, before the foundations of the earth were laid?" Before the foundations. The Watchers existed before the planet had a surface. They were the original creation. Humans came later. What modern readers don't realize is how this explains Genesis 1:2. The verse says, "The earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep." Formless and void in Hebrew is tohu wa bohu, chaos and emptiness. Why would God create chaos? Enoch provides the answer. Chapter 18, verse 13, describes Enoch being shown the prison of the stars and the powers of heaven, and being told this is the place where heaven and earth were corrupted. The chaos in Genesis 1:2 is not the starting point of creation. It's the aftermath of the Watchers' rebellion. God didn't create from nothing. He rebuilt from wreckage. Enoch wrote this between 300 and 200 BCE. In 2004, a team at the University of Cambridge, analyzing Mesopotamian flood myths, published findings showing that Sumerian texts from 2100 BCE describe a race of beings called Kal-Elu, divine sages who descended from heaven, taught humanity forbidden arts, intermarried with humans, and were destroyed in a great flood sent by the gods to reset creation. The study, published in the Journal of Near Eastern Studies, noted that the Apikalu narrative matches Enoch's Watchers account in structure, sequence, and outcome. The pattern appears across cultures. Pre-human intelligent beings, failed oversight, corruption through interbreeding, divine reset. Enoch's version is the most detailed, but it is not unique. In 2018, geneticists at the Max Planck Institute published research confirming that modern humans carry DNA from multiple archaic hominin species, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and at least 2 other unidentified groups. The paper notes that interbreeding occurred during a narrow window roughly 50,000 to 80,000 years ago, followed by a severe population bottleneck that reduced human genetic diversity to levels consistent with near extinction. Enoch describes interbreeding between species, followed by a catastrophic population reduction. The genetic record shows exactly that. The suppression starts at the Council of Laodicea in 364 Common Era. Church leaders removed Enoch from the biblical canon. The stated reason was excessive detail about angels. But the theological problem runs deeper. If the Watchers were created first, if they were given dominion over the earth before humans existed, then humanity is not God's original plan. We're the replacement, the backup. Augustine addresses this directly in The City of God, arguing that angels and humans were created simultaneously, that no intelligent beings existed before Adam. He calls Enoch's account a fable designed to excuse human sin by blaming angelic corruption. The church needed humans to be first. Enoch said we were second. Jerome, compiling the Latin Vulgate around 400 Common Era, writes in his preface that Enoch inverts the order of creation to diminish human responsibility. The Ethiopian church, isolated from Rome, kept Enoch in its canon. When James Bruce brought manuscripts to Europe in 1773, Oxford theologians who translated them called the Watcher's narrative incompatible with the doctrine of man's unique creation in the image of God. Charles, in his 1906 edition, added a footnote suggesting the Watchers were poetic representations of fallen angels, not a distinct prior species. The text says species. The church said symbol. But what the standard translation hides is this. In 1947, archaeologist Joseph Malik discovered fragment 4 Q531 at Qumran. The fragment, part of the Book of Giants, expands on the Watcher's story. Malik's preliminary notes describe it as containing, quote, anatomical descriptions of the Watchers, inconsistent with angelic immateriality, quote. He published a partial translation in 1976. Dr. Florentino Garcia Martinez, reviewing Malik's unpublished papers in 2009, noted that Malik's original Aramaic transcription described the Watchers as having, quote, forms of flesh and bone, not spirit, quote, but the published English translation rendered it as, quote, spiritual forms, quote. The manuscript says physical, the translation said spiritual. Now here's where it gets active. In 2012, a research team from Hebrew University applied for permits to conduct DNA analysis on skeletal remains found in the Carmel Caves in Israel, dated to approximately 100,000 years ago. The remains show anatomical features inconsistent with known hominin species. The application stated the goal was to determine whether the remains represent interbreeding between Homo sapiens and an unknown archaic population. The permit was denied by the Israel Antiquities Authority. The rejection letter, obtained through a Freedom of Information request in 2015, states the research lacks sufficient justification for disturbing remains of uncertain provenance. No alternative explanation was provided. The remains remain unsequenced. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying God literally created a race of immortal angels who had physical bodies, took human wives, produced giant hybrid children, and were destroyed in a global flood. The Book of Enoch is not a biology textbook. But what the text describes, when read carefully, matches a pattern the genetic and archaeological record supports. An earlier intelligent species with advanced knowledge, evidence of interbreeding with Homo sapiens, a severe population bottleneck, and the sudden appearance of cultural and technological knowledge that modern archaeology cannot explain through gradual development. Enoch had no way to know that human DNA contains segments from archaic species. He had no reason to describe a pre-human creation unless he was preserving a tradition that remembered one. And yet the text sits there in Aramaic and Ge'ez, saying what it has said for over 2 millennia. What we have to confront is the simplest explanation that fits the evidence. If the genetic record shows interbreeding with unknown hominins, if flood myths worldwide describe pre-human sages who corrupted humanity, if the text explicitly states the Watchers existed before the Earth's foundations were laid, and if God tells them, you were spiritual beings, living forever, not meant to take wives, then the text is not mythology. It's documentation. Enoch is preserving the memory of what came before us. Beings created first, given dominion, assigned to manage creation, who violated their mandate by interfering with the second creation, humans, and had to be removed. He wrote it down with the clinical precision of someone documenting a failed experiment. The Watchers were the first draft. We're the revision, and the question the text forces us to ask is whether the second attempt will succeed where the first one failed. The manuscripts remain in Aksum behind stone walls. The fragments sit in Jerusalem, cataloged and translated. The genetic data is public, peer-reviewed, verifiable. Archaic DNA exists in modern humans. Population bottlenecks appear in the record. Cultural knowledge appears suddenly in the archaeological timeline. And in a text, the church removed from the Bible 17 centuries ago, a man named Enoch describes the beings God made before us, the assignment they failed, and the reset that made room for humanity. The scroll is still there. The evidence is still there. And the question remains, if we're the replacement, what happens if we fail too?